The recent tensions between the United States and Brazil, sparked by new U.S. tariffs on Brazilian imports, may have unintended consequences that Washington didn't fully anticipate. At the heart of this brewing fallout is a quiet revolution happening in Brazil's financial sector. A revolution that bypasses the US dollar entirely. A government-run digital payment system known as PIX has rapidly transformed the way Brazilians handle money. It's fast, completely free to use, and spreading like wildfire. Since its rollout in 2020, PIX has already reached more than 76% of Brazil's population. It's now the go-to tool for everything from paying rent to buying groceries to sending money to family or friends. And it does all this without touching a single US dollar. That, more than anything, is beginning to make policymakers in Washington deeply uneasy. This isn't just about a piece of financial technology gaining popularity. This is about sovereignty, influence, and the erosion of American monetary dominance. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has been vocal about his vision for a more balanced global financial system. He has openly challenged the assumption that the US dollar must remain the world's default reserve currency, arguing instead for a multipolar currency world. "Why does the US dollar have to be the global reserve currency?" he once asked. "It doesn't have to be that way." Lula's remarks aren't isolated. They're part of a broader and growing sentiment across emerging economies that want more control over their own financial destinies. PIX, in this context, is more than just a payment app. It's a symbol of a shifting global order. While Brazil's move might seem like a purely internal modernization effort, Washington sees it through a different lens. It represents a tangible step toward de-dollarization, the gradual reduction of global reliance on the US dollar for trade, investment, and financial infrastructure. For decades, the dollar has been a pillar of US global power. It allowed the US to exercise influence far beyond its borders, including through mechanisms like sanctions and financial oversight. But systems like PIX, and the rising interest in alternatives, chip away at that foundation. As a result, what began as a quiet domestic innovation is now viewed by many in the US as a strategic threat. In light of PIX's success and Brazil's apparent pivot away from dollar dependence, the Trump administration launched a trade investigation aimed at Brazil. The concern? That Brazil is unfairly favoring PIX over American financial giants like Visa and MasterCard, effectively sidelining US companies and undermining open competition. The logic is simple. If Brazil promotes a local system that bypasses global, American-led infrastructure, it creates a precedent, one that other nations might follow. From Washington's standpoint, this could snowball into a real challenge to the US-led global financial system. But from Brazil's perspective, the story looks entirely different. Supporting PIX isn't about punishing the United States. It's about empowering Brazilians. It's about creating a system that works for the millions of citizens who have historically been excluded from traditional banking. Before PIX, many Brazilians lacked access to formal financial tools. Street vendors, gig workers, pensioners, they were largely shut out of the digital economy. Now with PIX, they can transact instantly, securely, and without fees or complex bureaucracy. For them, PIX represents not just convenience, but liberation. It's a tool for inclusion, not confrontation. This is why framing the rise of PIX as an anti-American development misses the point entirely. The narrative that positions local financial innovation as a threat to Western dominance is itself a byproduct of outdated thinking. A worldview that sees every shift in global power as a zero-sum game. But for countries like Brazil, it's not about taking down the dollar. It's about building something that works for them. The goal isn't to replace American systems out of spite. It's to move beyond them out of necessity. Indeed, currency multipolarity, the use of various national and regional currencies in global trade and finance, is not inherently hostile to the United States. It's not about good versus evil or choosing sides in some ideological financial war. It's about balance, resilience, and the practical benefits of financial sovereignty. Emerging economies want to participate in the global economy on fairer terms. They want options. And as technology like PIX becomes more common and more powerful, those options are becoming real. The geopolitical implications of this shift are immense. As former Brazilian diplomat Philip Yang has pointed out, PIX is already moving over $450 billion every month, and it operates outside the traditional, dollar-dominated framework. What's more, PIX is becoming interoperable with systems like BRICS Pay, an initiative jointly developed by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. BRICS Pay is designed to allow direct currency exchanges between member countries, bypassing both the dollar and the SWIFT messaging system that underpins much of the global financial infrastructure. And that's the heart of the matter. SWIFT, based in Belgium, is deeply entangled with US oversight. It has been a powerful tool for enforcing sanctions and maintaining financial influence. But alternatives like BRICS pay, and the rise of PIX as a domestic foundation for such alternatives, signal a break from that model. They point toward a world where financial flows can happen independently of Western institutions, rules, and political pressure. In this emerging reality, the dominance of the dollar is no longer guaranteed. Not because countries hate America, but because they want agency. They want systems that reflect their interests, their realities, and their futures. And so what we're seeing in Brazil with PIX is a microcosm of a much larger transformation, one that could reshape the global economic landscape in ways we're only beginning to understand. ChatGPT said, "The US dollar has long been much more than just a currency. It's been the world's trusted backbone for global trade, a symbol of American power, and a pillar holding up the entire international financial system. But that dominance depends entirely on one crucial factor: consent. Other nations keep using the dollar even when doing so makes them vulnerable to US political pressure. And now that consent is fading fast. China, the world's biggest exporter, already settles more trade in yuan than in dollars with some of its key partners. India and Russia have been experimenting with trading in rubles and rupees. Brazil is actively building the infrastructure to break free from dollar dependency right now. These moves aren't just isolated technical shifts. They're political statements that could shake the very foundations of American financial dominance. For decades, the United States could effectively control the global economy by wielding the dollar like a switch. It could freeze entire nations out of the financial system with a single sanction. Judges, politicians, and even whole countries could be punished through access to the dollar, as was seen in places like Syria, Russia, Venezuela, and Cuba. But now, alternatives like PIX and the BRICS alliance are challenging this power, proposing a future where the US can no longer simply shut down an economy or isolate a country at will. This tension came into sharp focus with the Trump administration's recent moves against Brazil. The US slapped a 50% tariff on Brazilian exports and imposed visa bans on Brazil's Supreme Court judges involved in the trial of former President Jair Bolsonaro accused of plotting a coup. These judges are not marginal figures. They are some of Brazil's most senior legal authorities. For much of the international community, the US action seemed like an overreach, an unacceptable interference in Brazil's sovereign legal process. Still, such measures remain a core instrument of US foreign policy, a key tool of coercion and pressure. Some in Bolsonaro's camp have even pushed for sanctions under the Global Magnitsky Act, which is designed to punish egregious human rights abuses and corruption. But former US defense officials doubt these sanctions would withstand legal scrutiny and warn that heavy-handed moves might backfire, driving Brazil away from the dollar system and closer to BRICS financial networks. The irony is stark. By trying to isolate and undermine BRICS, Washington could be accelerating the very outcome it fears most: the erosion of the US dollar's global supremacy. That supremacy rests on trust and widespread acceptance. But that trust is eroding. A complete shift away from the dollar won't happen overnight. Brazil, for instance, still relies heavily on the dollar for investment, trade, and managing inflation. Many of its elites maintain strong ties, financial, political, and personal, to the US, and those links won't disappear anytime soon. But the trajectory is unmistakable. The world is gradually moving away from the dollar's orbit. Systems like PIX represent more than just new payment platforms. They are a direct challenge to American financial dominance and a political declaration of independence from dollar hegemony. If these trends continue, the US may someday look back and realize that its harsh response to a relatively minor Brazilian payment app played a role in sparking a global financial earthquake, shaking the dollar's reign to its core. The dollar is not dead, but its undisputed reign is slipping, and the world is beginning to see the cracks in America's financial empire.